ourselves, or we can sit in our homes and hope winter never comes again. But it will. And the only way any good thing ever happened in history was that people were sufficiently willing to stand for it.
And I think they are certainly getting to that point now. If they're not there already, there's a good number of them are very definitely getting to that point, because it's, even if you're a sheeple, as that term goes, you have to be, the system must be serving you so well at this moment in time that you cannot see what's going on around you.
Yeah, so you work at McDonald's and some young gal who's pretty sharp, who's heard one of these shows, they've got the 16-year-old kid in there, and he's complaining that he can't move out from home, and his house is miserable, his parents are abusive, they want to get rid of him, and he can't afford it and everything. And she says, well, how much do you make a week? And he says, $400. And she says, you could buy a brand new house under mathematically perfected economy and only cost you $83 a month. Maybe he'll go visit a web page.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I have, I think, two questions that have kind of come into my mind during the final parts of this discussion, and it was relating to the house itself, and you just reminded me bringing that up again. First question actually has more to do with savings. The whole point behind the mathematically perfected economy basically is that it's the 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. That you create, you depreciate, and you extinguish. Now, if there are savings involved, then the depreciation period obviously becomes extended. How does people having savings affect this ratio and the ability for the stability of mathematically perfected economy to maintain itself that way without becoming inflationary in this case because of all the savings that are not doing anything? Well, and the other thing, sorry, just a quick one, was you have bought the house. You've gone through the $100,000 over 100 years and so on. What actually happens when you sell the house? How is it all worked out? So, sorry, just two quick questions.
Okay, well, the second question is really simple. You see, you're not assuming truly indebtedness. You're actually committing to pay for the thing as you consume of it. So the part that you're paying for is consumed. So you're not building up any equity if you do that. Now, whatever you save is equity. So what happens in the case of say you have savings and you just decided that you wanted to switch $100,000 of savings out of your account to fully pay off the $100,000 house. Well, you can do that. But what you have then at the moment before you begin to consume the house is $100,000 of equity in it. Now, as the payments are actually taken out of that against the house, you're paying for the consumed part, which is how much the equity decreases. So that's the accounting of it. What does this mean? This means that if you're making the minimal payments of the house, which is all you're obligated to do, that at any time, say on a linear scale of depreciation, I've consumed half the lifespan of the house, 50 years of its 100-year lifespan. And we're right at year 50, 0.50 years in this lifespan of the house at that point. That means I paid $50,000 of it off, and I still owe. I will have to pay $50,000 as each period of consumption comes up. Okay? Well, when you sell the house, being as you haven't built up any equity in it, someone else just takes over the remaining debt, as you would in a house today that you didn't have any equity in. The difference is that interest isn't counting against your accumulation of equity, so equity is inexpensive as it can be under mathematically perfected economy. Now, your first question, I'm not sure I understand that, but I can answer to parts of it clearly, and that is the principle that we're adhering to prevents inflation and deflation. So you can't raise a situation where there is inflation or deflation so long as we abide by the principle, which is to pay principal, and that's principal with a PAL instead of a PLE at the end of it, to pay principal at the rate of consumption or depreciation. This is what maintains our perpetual one-to-one-to-one relationship between remaining circulation, remaining value of represented property, and remaining obligation, which is the very thing that makes the whole thing work. Without the obligation, you have nothing. What do people pay for houses? Well, let's decide how much they pay. No, I want to pay for my consumption of other people's property with an equal measure of my own property. That's what we're saying in mathematically perfected economy. I'm not leaving it up to Ellen Hodge and Brown to decide today what I'm going to pay and tomorrow to change your mind again because that didn't work out so good. No, I'm paying a house for a house, and that's that. And I'm deciding what I'm paying for the house, so in terms of dollars, which is an expression of my wealth. So there isn't a situation that inflation or deflation actually occurs relative at least to the generic life cycle that we determine for the property and the generic method of determining depreciation, which by intention is meant to reflect our perception of how the property depreciates. So I don't know what you were asking about in the first question there.
Okay, well, I think we'll try and better explain it then. If we are working, we are earning wages. That money, that cash that we earn, comes from somewhere. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the creation part of it. It was created somehow at some point further up the ladder, where my boss or my client, whoever that might be, came into possession of this money. I then keep it and save it. So I'm not spending it out of the system at that point. I am just hoarding it. So it's not being destroyed, but it's not doing anything. It's still in the system. Mm-hmm. And I am saving it. So it's giving me some value that shouldn't change because there shouldn't be inflation and deflation. So, my $1,000 savings, if that's all I'm going to put away now, should still be worth $1,000 in 50 years.
Right.
But what I'm thinking is how does savings
how does it affect the whole circulation?
Exactly. Yeah.
And its ability to convey commerce and production. Well, here's the thing. As I mentioned a while back, a few issues back, here in this discussion, we may decide that what we want to do instead of a social security program is that we might want to require people to save so much. So that money would automatically be put aside. Now, I think probably you wouldn't find that many people that would save, a tremendous amount more than that, say 90% of their earnings, under mathematically perfected economy. But it doesn't matter if you do. In other words, what's going on there? In respect to yourself, if you were saving 90% of your earnings, just sucking them away in savings, what does that mean? 10% are spent on whatever they are, and there's the money to do that. It's sustaining that amount of economic activity. So it's the leeway, in effect, to save whatever we care to save, or to not save at all, whatever the case may be, and to have the monetization available to convey all of the commerce that we desire to convey. That whatever you're spending is the amount of we could call it monetary activity, but it is actually, I think, better described as industrial production and consumption. And whatever you're spending is sufficient to of your savings or earnings rather is sufficient to sustain that much production and consumption. So if somewhere someone feels a deficiency, which is the compelling factor to borrow further under the present obfuscated system, of course, so long as they're creditworthy to service the obligation that they engage in, they're free to issue a promissory obligation to the common monetary foundry, which processes their payments, enforces payments, and that monetization, ability to monetize, always suffices to create enough monetization to sustain production and consumption related to whatever the property is. And to finish that picture out, the other thing that we have to allow under mathematically perfected economy, and of course it's part of this mandate, which actually is a proof in law of a singular mathematically perfected economy. The other thing that we have to accommodate is monetization of equity. So suppose we consider that you effectively paid off your house at a faster rate that you consumed of it, and thus have some equity. Well, that equity must be accounted for in the system, that is by the common monetary foundry, as wealth possessed by you, which is immediately monetizable. So just as you can borrow on equity on your home under this system, you could effectively issue a promissory obligation to pay off the unconsumed equity on your home that you've already paid off. In other words, to repay it off after, withdrawing it, in the interim. So it really works the same way, except that we have an obligatory schedule of payment, which is what eliminates inflation and deflation, and we have the eradication of interest. That's all mathematically perfected economy really is. It's a monetary equivalent of barter. It's as if you went to that market with your 3 goats and your 20 chickens, and you wanted that herding dog. You just dreamed that herding dog was, the dog you wanted, and you get to the market, and sure enough, he's there. And God says, hey, here's evidence that you possess these 3 goats and 20 chickens, which is the equivalent value that man over there wants for his dogs. Just go over there and trade him for it.
Yeah, I'm I'm seeing it. I'm definitely seeing it. So,
yeah, it's really simple.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.